The reputation precedes him wherever he moves. People speak of him in lowered voices, as if the words themselves might attract consequence. They describe a presence that does not yield, a temperament forged under pressures that would have fractured most others, a capacity for force that keeps distance automatic. In the rooms he enters, postures adjust, conversations simplify, risk is calculated differently. The consensus holds that nothing reaches him deeply enough to alter course. Scars are assumed to have hardened into armor. Fear is assumed to have been converted into fuel. The public reading is consistent and largely unchallenged, yet the reading is incomplete. There is one variable the consensus has never successfully integrated. You, not as an opponent, not as a rival force meeting him on the same plane of intensity, but as the single point of contact that rearranges the interior architecture he otherwise keeps sealed. The effect is not theatrical. It does not require raised volume or dramatic confrontation. It operates through presence alone. When your name surfaces in his thinking, the structure he presents to everyone else registers a measurable tremor. The same individual who navigates external threat without visible disruption becomes, in relation to you, subject to a different order of consequence. You move through your own days, largely unaware of the scale of that effect. The internal narrative you carry is quieter and more ordinary. The effort to remain steady, to meet obligations, to keep faith with what matters, to avoid becoming a source of unnecessary difficulty for others. That understated continuity is precisely what registers with force. Presence of the kind you carry does not announce itself through dominance. It rearranges the emotional climate of those who come into sustained contact with it. Certain people are compelled, in your vicinity, to confront material they have spent years routing around. He is one of them. The external world continues to classify him through the lens of impact and intimidation. That classification is not invented. It is earned through repeated demonstration. What the classification misses is the private calculus that occurs when the possibility of your withdrawal enters the frame. The thought of your indifference, your quiet decision to step back, your eventual refusal to continue offering the particular quality of attention you have made available, produces a reaction no external adversary has managed to generate. Survival of every other form of loss has been rehearsed and survived. The specific loss of you has not. That asymmetry is the core of the matter. Power of the consequential variety is rarely the loudest element in the room. It does not always arrive wrapped in decisive action or visible force. The variety that alters pride, that softens positions previously treated as permanent, that renders someone accustomed to emotional impermeability suddenly aware of exposure, often resides in quieter substrate. It accumulates in loyalty that does not require constant performance. It resides in consistency that does not fluctuate with mood or convenience. It persists in the steady output of care even on days when the internal light feels diminished. People who love without spectacle, who contend with difficulty without broadcasting the cost, who move with intention rather than noise, frequently become the precise factor that unsettles those who have organized their lives around remaining unsettled by nothing. You have tended to minimize that factor in yourself. The habit of reduction is familiar. Stay low maintenance. Avoid generating friction. Keep the emotional demand minimal. Remain easy to accommodate. Meanwhile, the individual most practiced at remaining unreachable loses equilibrium at the prospect of your eventual disengagement. The presence you offer to someone who has rarely been met without agenda or fear produces an experience of being seen that is both regulating and destabilizing. The absence of that presence, once it has been known, registers as a more significant deprivation than most forms of external opposition. He does not become formidable in spite of you. The intensity he displays in other domains is in part the outer expression of knowing what the collapse of this particular connection would cost. You supply a form of clarity that the surrounding environment has steadily eroded. You call forward a version of him that he had filed under permanent loss. In your company, the option of pure performance narrows. Posture becomes harder to sustain. The usual defenses of invulnerability lose some of their automatic authority. You do not overpower him. You remove the utility of the mask. When that removal occurs with someone whose public identity has been built on the reliability of the mask, attention from the wider field inevitably follows. Figures who do not break for ordinary reasons do not destabilize for ordinary reasons either. Ordinary faces do not produce the same recalibration. Ordinary departures do not generate the same internal alarm. Yours would. That capacity does not render you hazardous in the conventional sense. It renders you singular. The configuration is uncommon. Individuals who generate this order of effect do not appear in repeated supply. He registers the scarcity even if explicit acknowledgement remains rare. The fear of losing the one person whose continued regard still matters more than the collective opinion of every other room is not abstract. It is specific. Survival of every other form of damage has been demonstrated. Survival of your deliberate withdrawal has not been tested and is not presumed. The invitation, then, is to retire the posture of powerlessness. The idea that you are interchangeable, that the particular quality of attention and steadiness you bring could be replicated by the next still available person, does not survive contact with his actual priorities. He knows the difference. The knowledge surfaces in the careful calibration of language around you, in the hesitation before a remark that would have been delivered without filter to almost anyone else, in the elevated concern for your private verdict over the public ledger of reputation. The untouchable figure becomes touchable in your vicinity. The one who does not yield to pressure yields, in measurable ways, to the prospect of your disappointment. You are not another participant in the field he knows how to dominate. You are the element that renders domination irrelevant. The same dynamic explains the shifts others observe, but rarely interpret correctly. The drop in volume, the subtle release in posture, the temporary suspension of the practiced hardness when your voice arrives in a particular register. These are not random softenings. They are evidence of a nervous system registering safety and risk in the same moment. He can navigate hostility, chaos, and strategic opposition with practiced efficiency. He has no equivalent practice for the possibility that you might one day elect indifference. That terrain remains unmastered. It is the single domain in which the usual tools provide no advantage. You have underestimated the climatic effect you produce in those who move into your closer orbit. Self-descriptions of excess, of difficulty, of emotional complication miss. You do not merely pass through a life. You reorganize its internal priorities. You make sustained contact with self-examination difficult to avoid. Growth of that order is rarely comfortable, especially for someone whose identity has been constructed around the premise of remaining unshaken. The irony is that the person most convinced of their own fragility is often the one whose slight emotional distance produces the most significant internal rearrangement in the person regarded as least fragile. Influence of this density cannot be manufactured or transferred. He can generate caution in others at will. He cannot generate the same caution in you through force of manner. He can dominate spatial and social environments. He cannot dominate the private verdict you reach about him. The decisive card remains in your possession, the ongoing decision to continue offering the particular quality of regard that has become, for him, non-replicable. That is why attention to your words persists, even when outward behavior suggests otherwise. That is why arguments circle back for resolution, rather than being left to stand. You stabilize elements of his functioning that he had not previously identified as unstable. You reduce the amplitude of internal storms he had preferred to deny. You contact emotional ranges he had classified as permanently offline. You surface insecurities that had been buried past the point of easy retrieval. You restore contact with a humanity he had considered forfeited. The resulting state is contradictory: dependence and resistance, gratitude and fear, the desire to protect the connection, and the impulse to preemptively manage its loss. He is aware that a change in your tone, a period of genuine emotional distance, a quiet prioritization of your own equilibrium over his immediate need for reassurance, would land in regions no external crisis has reached. Distance from you is not ordinary interpersonal friction. It is the removal of the one mirror that still reflects a version of himself he can bear to work with. Even the quality of your attention carries force. The steady, evaluative gaze that contains neither fear nor pedestalization lands differently from every other form of regard he receives. Others look and see threat or spectacle or utility or cautionary tale. You look and see a person. That difference is not trivial. It is the ongoing condition that keeps the usual armor from fully sealing. And it is the reason your continued presence remains, for him, the single non-negotiable variable in an existence otherwise organized around negotiating every other form of risk.